Welcome back. Welcome back to the Detroit is Different podcast studios. And in studios, I have somebody that not just is connected to Detroit is Different, he's connected to my family. Like, not like family, like, you know how you talk family. I mean, like, really, like, knew my mother before my mother passed away. I knew his mother before his mother passed, before his wife passed. Just, children, my father and him definitely know each other well. And that was like one of the introductions, one of the smartest people I've ever met. And thank God I have not necessarily been in need for some of the key services that he's provided to so many people, but grateful he provides that for people. And right now he is running for mayor of the city of Detroit. I know him always as Attorney Perkins. You may know him as Todd Russell Perkins, but right now he is running for mayor to be the next mayor of the city of Detroit. How you doing, Attorney Perkins?
Oh, man, I'm doing great. And, what you have to really talk about, your pops is one of the smartest dudes I know. And, he represented me professionally. He's a CPA. And this is a family that works, professionally. And, they are the fabric. Those are the type of small businesses that I look at as far as part of my plan in seeing the vision for Detroit are families like yours who have businesses. And look at where you're at.
Thank you.
You are in the entrepreneurial space because of your folks.
Definitely. Definitely, but also because of you. You were like one of my first clients.
Yeah.
And learning so many things along the way, like in studio, you all don't see it, but working with him is one of the young brothers that works with me, and that is Reggie Hobson. I always say Mr. Hobson, and as I told him, I was like, he actually put me on to a lot of business early. It's hard to think over time how the world of content creation, what would happen, how this would happen, and what would grow of this.
Right.
You were big in like the making of Detroit is Different before Detroit is Different was known to so many other people.
Well, and I love being a part of somebody who is growing and growing beyond whatever their possible dreams would be. And a lot of times people don't understand where you're at right now, what it took to get there, and that energy, that desire. And what it is you're not afraid to fall. What you've learned from your parents being in an entrepreneurial atmosphere, you're not looking for someone to always catch you when you fall. It's good to fall sometimes because you learn from those experiences, and now you continue to get better the next time. Because it's that thought process when I'll do some contract work for someone, and then they'll try to fix it, and they won't do it the right way, and they'll come back, and I say, look, we just won't do it this way again. But we learned better, and now you're stronger from that. It's just like when you work out, all you're doing is tearing apart your muscles, and your muscles grow back stronger. And that's what you've done. And I see this process, what you've got here, because I watched Detroit is Different, and I've seen from and I knew from the very beginning what you were doing, and it was where you're at and where you're gonna go. I mean, the sky is the limit.
Thank you so much. And it definitely actually has been one of those processes. I do remember early on so much, as I always say, taking an L, meaning like the loss is a lesson. Yeah. Especially in business. Nothing teaches you more about business than losing a lot of money, because that sticks you. And I definitely got degrees in business and all of that stuff. And cool to be in a degree, but like when you're working on a project and you don't get the grade you want, it's different. But when you lose whatever you consider is a significant amount of money, depending upon where you at in business, so it could be $100 if you're running that lemonade stand, or $100,000. It's definitely gonna stick in your mind of, what were my steps? What were my beats? What did I learn in this? And staying in the game. And you've been in that game. But
oh yeah, and I've been in businesses outside of the practice of law, real estate,
very much
restaurant.
So. Yes.
And the irony of it is the restaurant really was for the life of COVID. And it was very, very profitable because it was a carry-out restaurant, and at a time when no one could go in and sit down. And, when COVID lifted, I had to go back to court, and it's kind of hard to find management. So we sort of mothball that. But again, the practice of law has been the staple for me. And it has been something where I've met people. I meet people like you because of the practice of law and give people advice on building businesses. I also go to court with people, like where you said, I'm glad I don't have to have you as a lawyer. And, so it's it's a wonderful ride. I look forward to, as God will give me strength to continue on, because nothing's promised. But it's just, I enjoy seeing young people grow, because I want to help them in any possible way, because I don't have to take anything from them or get anything from it other than the ability to say, I was part of that.
And as you talk about part of that, we can frame this. You've been on, and it was even before like the rhythm of this.
Yeah.
And I know a little bit of the backstory just from conversations we share. And like I say, as much as I say, I'm glad I've definitely not needed the criminal defense, but he can attest. Boy, I've given many of people like, hey, it's only one number I'm calling if I'm ever in one of them jam up situations. Well, the other guys in Ghana half the time. And shout out to Jeff Edison.
That's my big brother, man. My goodness, yeah.
So
I bring him in on. It's interesting. I bring him in on cases when he's going to be in town. And he's but I saw him in his sort of mid phase of his practice, because I've been doing this 28 years now, going on 29 years, and I saw Jeff Edison growing, and he's in the mid stages of his practice, probably where I am at right now. And I saw him when he started building his home in Ghana.
Yeah.
And I saw it being showing me pictures. And my first wife, before she passed, we used to talk about going over and spending some time, because we lived in the same co-op as Jeff Edison, Judge Braxton, a lot of people, a lot of familiar names were living in our co-op. And we just, he's just a wonderful guy. He believes in the upliftment of us, and in his Pan-African thoughts and beliefs, and beliefs of the fact that we are better than what people give us credit for, and we're better than what we even think we can be.
Very much so. And that's where I was going to frame this. In knowing some of the backstory, I usually always start with the origins, but so much you've learned in lessons about building things from your father that you share with me. Also, rest in peace, Mama Perkins, and your mother, but what that balance was. Can you share a little bit about your upbringing, and more so that framing and the ingenuity you pulled from your father's visions?
So tell me how much time we got, because I could talk about my folks all day.
Yeah.
Because without them, I wouldn't be where I'm at. So it really starts from my father's father and my mother's father and grandfather, because I live in the home that my great-grandfather bought when he moved up here from the Great Migration. I think he bought the home sometime in the 40s.
Whereabouts did he
I'm
move
in
from?
North End, Detroit. Oh, he moved. He was from Georgia.
Okay.
And just south, a couple hours south, I think Macon, Georgia. My younger brother, Sean, who's the judge, he does our family tree now.
Genealogy.
Yeah, he does our genealogy. And my mom, he took it over from my mom. And he's very active in that. But, they had, my mother's father was a hardworking man. And let me tell you, his story was he ultimately owned the house that I own today. So it went from father to son, and then to me,
grandson
or great grandson.
Yeah.
And so from his story, he was a guy who was born lived through the Depression, didn't really believe in borrowing money. He worked at Dodge, Maine. When he go into a car dealership, he'd go buy a Chrysler because he works for Dodge. He had that kind of loyalty because the companies at that time had that kind of loyalty for their employees. And he'd go into the showroom and he said, I want to buy this car. And they said, Mr. Pace, we got some great incentives on borrowing money. He says, I didn't ask you for your money. And buy his car cash, and worked hard all his life. And he told me he got that job outside of having worked for DPW. And he explained what happened in the neighborhood. He died in 85.
Wow.
And when I was 15 when he died, the summers before, we would sit on the porch because we lived there, and we would talk about how the neighborhood was. And he described the Depression. And in the Depression, he used to say, the white men in suits come knock at your door. And they knock at your door and they say, would you like welfare as a check, or would you like a job for the DPW? And my grandfather chose the job. And he said the people that took the check 50 years later, or even 60 years later, were still taking the welfare. He could point it out in the neighborhood. Now, the neighborhood is so far deteriorated from what it was then as far as the housing base, and structures have been torn down and burned down over the years. It's been 40 years, almost 40 years since then. But that's that side of the family, whereas my dad's side, my grandfather was a barber, owned a restaurant. He was the first barber prosecutor back in the 40s.
Wow.
And my dad got that entrepreneurial bug from him, but he was also a barber. But my parents, they met, and, we grew up different parts of the city, but ultimately rested on the North End, because that's where my dad was born, on the North End too. And, they made sure my dad was a barber. My mom was a clerk at the public library, and they didn't make much money, but I had 5 brothers, and they found a way to send us all to we all went to Catholic high school. My oldest brother went to DePores. My next brother went to U of D. My brother after that graduated from Benedictine. I went to U of D, and my 2 younger brothers went to Shrine. All on, you can't even do the math to figure out how they did it. But at the same time, I got to say I'm eternally grateful, because my mom believed in the idea. And I'm sure she's told you about continuing school when you were talking, because you got your master's. I think you got.
I got my master's from Walsh.
From Walsh. That's where. Yeah.
And bachelor's there, and yeah, she was definitely big in one of those stories. You get different people that stop you in moments and say, like, yeah, definitely what school can be and what it can exist in changing a reality for a person.
Right.
And your mother adamantly believed that through education, opportunities will be created. And she's a living testament just from looking at you and your brothers.
Yeah, and thank you for that. But she used to also say, and she lived in the idea of being Black in a white world, and growing up where she did, born in 38, she saw a lot of things we didn't see. But there's still, some of those things are still going on, but they're so far underneath that people don't see them. But she said, look, with an education, they can't take that away from you. They can take away your house. They can take away your car. They can take away your clothes, but they can't take your education away from you. And she says, that's power. And so when you have that power, what it does is it opens your mind up to seeing different things. My parents, again, they made sure that I could go to school all over the world. I went to school in France, went to school in the East Coast, in New Hampshire. And I come back here, went to law school in downtown Detroit at University of Detroit Mercy Law School. But there was nothing that they wouldn't do to make sure that I had that education. And, they saw in me that entrepreneurial spirit. Now, my brothers have come, and like Sean has worked for the firm, but he worked for Ford. And he's still, that's another story there, but he's a judge today. But he still works for Ford. He's on leave of absence. This guy is a hardworking person, hardworking father, and just a guy. He's my younger brother, but I look up to him a lot. And the rest of my family have experimented into the entrepreneurial world, but myself, I've never had outside of college. I've never had a job.
So let's talk about that, because I remember these are things that we would share. And then you would often tell me, hey, your dad and this, that, and the other, just learning different things. And just having an understanding for the way you've grown, one of the strongest Black practices, not just in Detroit, in Michigan, but I'd say in the Midwest.
Thank you.
It's a lot. And very personable, but also just being an attorney. And one of the things you used to always uplift to me, because I would ask questions to you often, and you would say, sometimes you be surprised the problems that people end up in and what they won't want to open up about. So if y'all kind of get what I'm laying down, what I'm saying is you call your attorney and you're opening up about some of the things that could be most embarrassing about, like, you'd be surprised how many people are in deals that a contract wasn't signed.
Right.
How much people you would expect. It's like, wow, you got that house without a deed, and not just, I would be like, okay, isn't that just common folks? It's like, nah, these are like high up people. So that trust that you build with your client.
Yeah, so it's I like how you frame that, because those are some, without the names.
Yeah.
But and some of the people that I think your family have worked for, so there was some crossover there. But these are people, and what it is that it's the pride. They're supposed to be people that are looked up to. But one of the things that I've always looked at in life is that I don't ever want to get to the point where I'm so prideful that I won't take advice from someone who can help me. And that's what happens. And I'm not saying that it's hard to explain it, because this is something that I do every day, and I have to build a relationship with someone. Number one, they know when they come and talk to me, it's a vault.
Yeah.
It's a vault. I mean, whether it doesn't go anywhere beyond my team, because there are other lawyers in our firm, and, it's a vault. And it will be something that we do and constantly are working on and thinking about, because here's what I do know. The intense amount of thinking that you can put to a problem, I believe that every problem has a solution. And it's just like, I'll give you an example. All these things and technology that we have today, look at this. And it's very simple thought. And, people think, this way out, dude. All of this technology, it takes satellite communication for this to work, for the internet to work and for all these things to work. And so therefore it took rocket technology to get the satellite up there. And then it took electricity. But, if we're dealing in, let's say, the Renaissance era, the 1500, in theory, all of these things existed. But yet our minds couldn't catch up to it yet. Do you understand the levels of things that had to happen in order for us to evolve into this space?
Yeah.
The things that we take for granted 100 years ago, people were perplexed in how to do it. Just like, I'll give you, and one of the things I'm so passionate about, and I know we go off, and that's what I love about podcasts, because we kind of go off.
Yeah, and we'll circle back.
We'll get back to the campaign, which is, Perkins for the people. But here, what I love about the city of Detroit, and what a lot of people don't know about the city of Detroit, is we are the birthplace of research and development.
And as you talk about a lot of that research and development, me having a marketing degree, and I'm going to just give this to people for free. So if you go downtown, it is a library, the Skillman Library. I think a lot of people know of the Skillman, the foundation, but the Skillman Library downtown, you have like drafts of, you talk about Dodge, like the drafts of not just how the Dodge was created, but the marketing plans and the marketing strategies. Right. And this goes deep into the automotive industry, because if you know the arc of most modern marketing, it comes from the automotive industry. The thought process is like, you start in this car, then you end up in this car, then you land in that car. So like if you're with Ford, you'll start like in a basic Ford, and then eventually you're going to grow into a Lincoln. Right. This is all different things, talking to people differently. But as much as marketing's working in this space, it is research and development into that place. Because you have to research like, okay, what's going on with the person's lifestyle? How are they communicating in this? I give all of this framework to say, like, we've had a lot of people entrenched in this, especially Black folks, every step of the way of making really what became what we call the industrial age, to automation, to so much things, into creativity, even the whole concept of Motown. So like, it's like motor records, hence Motown becoming a staple for the world to connect to American culture, Black American culture, and what existed at one point in time, and still like just other reiterations of it. So I leave that as a pin for you to come back to you in starting your business.
Well, I looked at, my dad always said, we didn't spend all this money to send you to school all over the world, go to Ivy League education, and you flunky for somebody else.
Interesting.
And they didn't mean it in a negative way.
But that's also a funny thing that Joe, that term too is like such an old school term.
And he said, and it hit me, and I had no desire to, and I had no fear in going out, and I didn't fear failing, or I like to say falling, because failure is falling and then giving up. Because if you fall and you get back up, you'll learn how not to fall again. Just like you were saying, like sometimes the L that you take, would be that lesson that you get. And I looked at it from that perspective, and I looked at, hey, I've been in this town. I know this town. I know the people in this town. I know the pulse of this town. And, having grown up on the North End, when I opened up for my campaign, I did it on the North End of the Considine, and I talked about how it started. So, my dad, and right before law school, my dad and I, we used to write resumes for people. And I didn't realize what he was teaching me. My dad didn't have a college degree until he graduated from college with my younger brother, Sean. And Sean walked in front of my dad because my dad was William and Sean was Sean. So yes, it's just alphabetical.
Yeah.
But I looked at it and I was thinking to myself at 22, 23 years old, my dad's telling me these things and I'm not understanding the value of experience of life versus, I got this education and I know more than my dad in some ways, but I'm still following him, but I'm not fully grasping onto it. And it didn't take hold until several years later. So we would go down when GM was laying off people in 92. My dad went out and bought a huge printer and we started writing resumes. We met them at the door at the Fisher building or at the GM building where they were laying them off. Wow. And we did resumes from those individuals and made our money back. But then I started going to school, so I couldn't put all the time into that. But I learned how to write resumes and learned, I was always pretty decent at writing. And my dad was, he was phenomenal. And so then I get out of law school. I worked in law school, Court of Appeals, had made relationships. And when I got out, I went down to the courthouse. I just went down to the courthouse. I met a couple of people. Marlon Evans, who's passed on, but he's a great mentor of mine. I shared an office space with him when our first couple of years I practiced. And I started picking up clients. But here's the thing. I was from the North End. When I got to my friend Doc, Jesse, he got all kinds of names, but he gave me a car. And some friends of ours had a case. I took care of the case, and they sort of bartered. He gave me the car, and he also gave me some money. And Doc's a mechanic, and that car, that '87 blue Eldorado, got me everywhere. And when it broke down, they'd be there to come fix it. And that understanding and how they lifted me up, has taken me all over the country.
And you talk about all over the country, something else from Attorney Perkins that I remember from you being a client. You'd always say the law is a strange bird. And I remember when you said it, I was like, okay, that's a very odd concept, right?
Yeah.
And a lot of our government structure, now this is coming over to the mayor, is so built on legality. That's why, like, when you read ordinances through the city of Detroit, the there shall be in this, right. Reading these ordinances, it's not as plain as, you should be able to put a fence up right here. No, it's not layman's. It's not Chat GPT language. This is law.
Right.
Can you explain a little bit of that relationship, as you definitely have some experience with municipal law with Highland Park and other spaces, but even the city of Detroit, but explain some of that relationship and how you got into that.
So let me say, as I practiced law, you make these relationships, and it was around, I started representing, I would say, what you might call upper tier
clientele,
municipal clientele, chief of police, deputy chiefs of police. Even though I was doing criminal work, I was representing these individuals because you had gained a certain amount of skill set as a lawyer, that they appreciated what you did and would take that into other areas. Sometimes a divorce, a lawsuit, sometimes a little criminal situation. But the ability to engage and ability to be able to bring all the issues in one space in your mind and be able to communicate that to your client effectively, but more importantly, communicate it to the person that might be adverse to your client. And be able to be successful in influencing them to not do what they otherwise might do to your client. And that's kind of like the development as a lawyer, development as an individual, as a man, and as then become a father, become a husband, and all of those things. So that's that life experience. So all the knowledge that I knew when I became a lawyer, at the time you take the bar, you probably know more law than you ever even want to know at one point in time. Because, once you learn the law, you know how to go look for it. You know how to go write ordinances. Because the things that all the other candidates are talking about doing, I'm already doing for them. I'm, like you said, I was a city attorney in Highland Park. I'm the current city attorney in Inkster. I represent the Detroit City Council. And when the things that they need to ask about policy, ask about ordinances, how to write them, how effective they are they constitutional? Will they pass constitutional test? They got to ask me. So that's the natural transition and how I found myself in looking at, I have to do this for the city of Detroit, the city that I love, this city that has loved me back, and this city that actually needs leadership. So remember when we were talking a little bit before we got on, and that's where you come in and you develop this idea. What is leadership? It is, as I'll break it on down, but it's a cornucopia of different things that create leadership. That means ability, skill set, the ability to engage, talk to people understand you, a little bit of charisma. They got to like you at the same time. But most importantly, they got to trust you. And something is trust when you're in that foxhole and y'all got problems. And then you say, that's the person I want you to have. I want to have my back. As a lawyer, it's been a lot of people who've been in that foxhole who've called me to come and help them fight their way out, and that's why it is, to me, it's a natural transition for me to ascend to this particular position and be the lawyer, particularly at a time like this.
And when you talk about the time like this, it's 2 points that I want to give. So I know you can knock both these dominoes down. The time like this is we're really looking at
unprecedented,
a lot of debts that will become before who's ever next in place in office.
Right.
Meaning that we've seen 12 years of the Duggan administration, which in a lot of ways, for many reasons, are different. And I mean, I guess you could say every day is different. Detroit is different. Yeah, but that moment in time post bankruptcy.
Can I put a pin in that right quick?
There you can go.
So you're absolutely right. So break it on down to them even further. I don't know if you were going to go there, but I know you know.
Okay.
You and your MBA self, and you know what I'm saying? People don't understand how highly educated you are because you know how to talk to people and not, you know what it is? It's like if I can walk with kings nor lose the common touch. And that's how you've been. But you couldn't be any other way because of how your parents were to you.
Thank
and
you.
how my parents were to me.
Thank you.
I could not talk down to people. Man, something, I could feel my parents come up and smack me out the face, out of the ground, man,
right.
out of the sky,
Yeah.
And it's just not something that is what we should do. But here you talk about it's different, right?
Yeah.
So, here's the reality. When we have a bankruptcy, you start off with a zero balance sheet, and then the state conveys to you $1 billion. And then along the way, with the relationship that Duggan had with Biden, he gets $846 million on the ARPA funds. And then you have a couple $100 million every couple of years because of this 100-year floods.
Yeah.
So you were able to use that money on your balance sheet beyond what you collect in taxes, revenue, and revenue sharing that comes from the state and all those other things. So this has been unprecedented. And then at the time, throughout the time that he's in office, really didn't have to deal with the significant increase in payments toward the pensions.
Okay, and now I got to put a pin in where you're coming from.
Yeah.
Because this is definitely where a lot of Detroiters are talking, because during the bankruptcy, it gets foggy for a lot of Detroiters.
Including my mama, who was a city insured employee. Yeah, so I know that.
And the fogginess is more so built on, I believe, the apathy that grew in a lot of Detroiters. And you could say even just American voters themselves into just not understanding systems.
Particularly in Detroit, though.
Particularly in Detroit. And I'm gonna heighten this. I'm one to years ago I would look at, like, sometimes it would anger me, but then as I've grown, I'm like, people exploit apathy too. because it's
They
two
have, and they
ways.
continue to do so.
Yes, it's a lot of ways you can use it. It's not like it's one way or the other. It's like, no, you can take it, you can exploit that because there's certain things that can happen under it. Now, I give this framework to say certain people during that time in bankruptcy, it just gets overwhelming and confusing.
Mhm.
Now, as we talk about those pensions coming back,
Mhm.
and not the influx,
the payments.
the pension, yes, the
Yeah,
pension payments will
because
be.
if you talk to those retirees, they still talking about getting their money back.
Yes.
But
So
that's beside the point.
so yes.
Not beside it, but that's
the
another point.
the payments come, that's now going to be listed. So it's a reality where this next 4 years, if not executed, almost to precision, like almost like a perfect gymnastic flip, like where you nail the landing, it could easily drift back into the same bankruptcy situation, was what some
Not
people have
drift.
said.
I mean, now you're talking about going into the abyss because you've already been in bankruptcy, and
Yeah.
oversight ends, I think, in 2027 or 2028. So we still are under federal oversight.
Yes.
And so you're absolutely correct. And, that's what people don't understand. And I'm trying, as a lawyer, I must be transparent and I must be honest. And as a lawyer, I can't promise any outcome, and I'm not going to promise any outcome other than the fact that I'm going to use the skills that I have, the team that I build, to take take the city to the next level. Because you're going to read. The reality is, this is an absolute reality. You're going to have to do more with less, because people are not going to accept less at this point if all people's aspirations and dreams and thoughts are of a city that's growing.
And that's what makes this such a different, and I'm going to say a difficulty for who's up next. Because the standard and the expectation, I believe, was never necessarily as realized as sometimes it's presented, especially through traditional media, which this is a Khary Frazier stance. This isn't even a Detroit is different stance, but definitely under white leadership, media has been a lot more
Benevolent, nice, kind.
Yes.
And,
And
they're not.
already, even in just this, even in campaigns, we've seen certain stories where it's like, wow, I don't think I'd have ever seen something like this in a, in another in the current administration already, just with campaigning. And then we look at, this was brought up during Fred Durrell's interview when I interviewed Mayor Chokwe Antoine Lumumba at the time when he was mayor of Jackson, Mississippi, and what he's faced. It's another heightened look of scrutiny.
You're talking about
Yeah,
son.
yeah. So like it's another scrutiny just in executive leadership, black leadership, period. And this is where I also was thinking to myself, like, wow, Attorney Perkins, you have such a successful law firm to walk into the fire like this.
I'm in the fire right now because, what it is, what people don't seem to understand, and they want to dress this up differently. We're all on a fire. It maybe the temperature's a little less or a little more, but something, I consider that something that happens for me every day. Whether I'm living the experiences with my client who are on fire, but the thing is, if we're walking through the fire, at least we're moving, right? And you can't, like you said, you cannot get this wrong. And something no one has demonstrated. You got a pastor who has great ideas and thoughts, but no detail on how to do this. So what you're going to do, and who's also said, I'm going to still preach on Sunday. This is a 365-day, 24/7 job that you cannot, nothing else can come in the way of doing this job. And no skill set in having done this. The fact that you've learned and taught people how to feed people and how to give people knowledge from the Bible, this ain't something we can pray our way out of. You have to have some skill set to do so. Then you've got other people who don't know the jobs that they have currently that they used as their platform as the reason why they should go to the next level, to be promoted to be mayor. You got Fred Durhall, who doesn't know the budget numbers, and yet he touts himself as being the budget guru. Didn't know the numbers. No one else knew the numbers, as far as I know. I believe when we were in that panel, you were at that panel, Mary agreed with me, but she didn't step up and say it. I'm on the outside looking in, and I know this stuff because I'm not going to get involved in a process or ask for somebody's vote or ask to do something for someone and not know how to do it. That's my ethical obligation to do so. People just want this job because of what they think it is and what it feels like, but they don't understand the responsibility that's rested on your shoulders, the knowledge that you need to have because they just don't have it. And again, what I'm talking about, there's no one out there who's a self-made CEO from the ground up. Now, you have some people who've had success in life, but they have not had to make the decisions and had to build something from scratch. This is something that you're working on in this city. You have to have somebody who has that knowledge and has that ability. I'm the only one. But then you talked about apathy, right? Mm-hmm. They use apathy. They've used apathy to keep people at home from voting. And that's why we get 16, 17% or 18% voting turnout in a city election that matters so much. And what people need to understand, we go out and vote for the presidential. Since I was 18, I haven't missed a vote. Whether I be in another country or whether I be in school on the East Coast, I didn't miss a vote. In fact, my son forgot to vote absentee last year. We flew him home to vote. That's just how important it is to convey that importance to my kids, not only to my kids, but this is what I feel is important too. And so that apathy, people feel like they don't matter. It's kind of like what I'm going through right now with white media, with white infrastructure, where I'm in Mackinac. I poll higher than at least one of the other individuals who's there, Fred Durhall, and yet they keep me off. They don't want me there. They've demonstrated that, but the people want me. That's what they don't understand, and that's what I need to understand about that apathy. You can use it as a tool, but oftentimes that tool of apathy is used for bad reasons.
And this is where now I'm gonna get on. This is definitely another Khary. This is another Khary perspective thing, and this is definitely one of those myself and one of my OGs, Mr. Stovall. Shout out, Mr. Stovall. But on one hand, we have like a constituency of so many people that talk, and I'll be interviewing the brother actually same night in a couple minutes. Donovan McKinney that's running for the congressional race, and you have so many people that are in faith-based leadership positions that are speaking up saying that we need Black Democratic congressional leadership for the city of Detroit. But in the same vein, some of these same leaders a year out have stood behind our current mayor that's running as an independent for the gubernatorial race. Right. Now, this is where it gets very confusing, and I do believe that apathy was taken advantage of during the Duggan administration to be elected twice. But that also created a groundswell for my current congressional representative, Sri Tanadar, to take advantage of it as well. I don't think you can compare both. Like I say, this is a Khary Frazier statement.
But I mean,
I think it's like, you can't, you know what I'm saying? It's like if I keep, you know what I'm saying? If I leave the door open to welcome in the bird, I'm also going to welcome in the flies. You know what I'm saying?
Understood. And you know something? It's a combination of different things also. And there's a lack of cohesion and togetherness in our community that has caused us to remain fragmented, to remain broken apart, separatists in mind, and an inability to drive missions. Because if we do things together, as I say in my campaign slogans, at least one of them is, doing and making Detroit better, much better together. That in and of itself, it sounds like a sort of a cliched or slogan of sorts, but it's a reality. If we are aligned, on a particular matter, there's nothing we can't accomplish. I mean, look at other cultures that are doing it. I've been down in Southwest Detroit, and I look at some of the Latinx community. I was at a place last night, fabulous. From the outside, it looks like an older governmental building, but on the inside, they have recreation. They have a bar. It's a restaurant, pool hall, entertainment. And they all did it not asking for anything, but they did it as a community. They did it together. And what we don't have, and sometimes in our culture, in the Black world, we don't have that. And that's what happened when you're talking about the congressional seat. There was a determination by everyone that I wanted it, rather than looking and being strategic on saying, okay, maybe I can't have it, but I'm going to support this individual. It just wasn't going to happen.
But I have to say this, and it's so tough because I'm not, in this position. Like I say, speaking just still as me, like it's so tough because also the engagement and what's responded to. There are so many different things needed to resource communities like these. I know you're very aware, like I say, on an intimate level, because just representing a person for a civil matter or a criminal matter, it starts opening up the floodgates of everything else going on in a person's life.
Right. So go ahead and say that what you said again about the resources.
The resources needed in our community and how we see things. And I think sometimes we can take things as personal attacks. And I'm hoping a person doesn't look at this like I'm throwing stones at anyone particularly personally. No, because it's not. I think anyone that wants to do something constructive in the city of Detroit, let's do it. The Legos need to be built. I'm just saying that how we do it has to connect to people. And some of these messages that are going out in one way, it just disconnects. And that was what drives down apathy, because to hear that
drives up.
Yeah. Because it's like to hear something like we need Black Democratic leadership in the city of Detroit, but you're not standing with Black Democratic leadership running for mayor, it throws off. It's like that same person is like, okay, what's going on here? Like, I don't understand it. And that's where a lot of people feel like, is this a game? Is this connecting? What's making sense? Who's actually walking with me? Because there's many people in communities like mine, on my block, this is as Detroit as it get, that feel just
But what they do is they lose trust. That's what I'm trying to tell people. You got to trust the source. I've been consistent in everything, in all my messaging and everything that I do for the 28 years I've been practicing law and whatever I did before that. You have to remain consistent, because what you're saying, that's an inconsistent modality. That's an inconsistent way of thinking, is to say, on one hand, we want strong Democratic leadership in the House, right? Versus now I'm going to support Mr. Duggan, who's now declared himself as an independent and who's otherwise sort of thrown a finger to the Democratic Party.
Yeah.
Now, I did have the opportunity to talk to him the other day, and I asked him, I said, look, why did you do that? I had never talked to him before, but I reached out to him because I'm going to have his job, so I want to talk to him. I want to create that relationship now. And I said, look, why would you do that? Why would you leave the party? I said, personally, I think you would have won the Democratic nomination. And his response was, well, I wanted to be able to govern. And he says, I wanted to be able to govern, meaning that if he runs as an independent, that he could curry favor, or he could at least be able to work with Republicans and Democrats. I get it. But what he's not getting is that the war exists. And, there's, I'm of the mentality right now that there's a war that is for the fate of this country.
Expand on that.
What you see is people so polarized. I do like a centrist mentality. I do like having the idea of there's some things I'm conservative about. There's some things I'm not. But I don't ever want anything. Being a lawyer, I want to always have the Constitution work its way through and give everybody equal access to the law, equal freedoms, and not be subjected to what we've known as disparagement and attack on particular areas of the community, particularly the Black community. And anyone who's been disenfranchised. That's what I'm a constitutional lawyer. Any lawyer who understands what they're doing is really, it's got its bones and it's got its foundation in the Constitution. But yet you see today, because people are on so far opposite sides, that some things are not working.
I definitely agree with you there. And it's so tough because people, before they even apply, one of my favorite things that I love is critical thought. Like before people just step back and say, all right, let me just look at this.
They want it easy.
It's already going to be a bias based on who's bringing it, where
Right.
is it at.
But some people are
Who's
not
standing
critically
with this
thinking.
person.
They're not critically thinking, and they don't want to be forced to think critically. And, but at the same time, I have to say this. The stuff that's coming from the right, some of it's just evil.
Yeah.
It's just evil. Now, I think that some of the stuff from the left is just too optimistic. You understand that? And I don't think there's an evil overtone in that regard. But some of the things that they're doing, like the stuff that has come out of this current administration to get rid of and throw with the Job Corps that we saw last week, to throw these kids out in the street.
Yeah.
And without a plan, now, is there some need to reform how spending is done and measures on how to perform, how things within the government are performing? Okay, I can accept that. I'm not necessarily agreeing with it or disagreeing with it, but I can accept that reality that some people have been inefficient. Some departments may have been inefficient, but the mechanism that they choose in order to gain efficiency. But see, I also believe underlying that is a more insidious purpose and a more devious idea that is at play. You know what I'm saying? They want to get rid of it because they don't want social programs anyway. They don't want these things, and they want to, so those are some things that, in my, mindset when I'm thinking and praying and looking at what's going on in the world. Those are the things that concern me, because I think there's a methodology and there's a process in place that you could unwind these things so that they don't cause so much pain or so much fear, just like to people who are retired, who don't know what's going to happen with their Medicare. Yeah. You understand what I'm saying? So all of these things, Social Security, now you can't call that number that people typically used to call. So all of those things, it puts people in these spaces of fear.
Puts them in fear. And then as that heightens, the distrust, hence apathy, where people just sit back and they say, I don't know, maybe I'll get a Social Security payment this month. Maybe I won't.
And then at the end of the day, they say, well, my vote doesn't matter anyway.
And that is the root of like how it's all attacked upon, and it strengthens the vote of a person that does vote.
But now the Perkins administration is going to change that. I am something, I look at myself. I am a person that's not aligned to any infrastructure within government. I am a person just like that average individual going into the voting booth. I'm the person who lives on the block with people who are going into voting, who are concerned about what others might consider small issues. How much more is my insurance going to go up, or how much is my insurance? And what am I going to do with some of the trash pickup and different things like that? That just, as I say, everyday people, that's where I am at. And I've lived in that space. I understand that space, and I'm not speaking from a perspective that I'm trying to appease anyone other than give information, education, and most of all, representation to the people.
So as we get to a close here, and we got some more time, but I do want you to hit on a couple different things. But before you give some of your plan, running a campaign, it's a lot, every day, especially such a large campaign. Oh, yeah. It's not like this is
all over the city.
This ain't like the cul-de-sac president. You know what I'm saying? So what was the buy-in of your wife, of your children, of the people that you work with at the law firm? What was the response of everyone when you said, hey, I'm running?
I love my family. I love the people at the firm. And it was important for me to ask them first before, first pray about it, ask God, then talk to my wife. And once I saw that my wife was supportive, I didn't feel there any barriers, but I was enthused along the way that I asked my firm, and they've been supportive because they know you see, the difference between me and, like, I brought up the past, right? And I brought up a lot of individuals running. But day one, or the day after I win, the practice is going on to the other lawyers.
Wow. Wait, time out. I want you to bring home that, and because when I say this, this ain't no small practice you're giving them.
It's 28 years. All my life. All my adult life.
And have you ever even heard of a practice of 28 years being given to another group? Like, and I'm not even saying that in like praise or nothing. I'm saying that in just business world of like,
I'm giving this to my partner.
Wow.
And his team.
Wow.
I don't want anything money for it. Whatever salary I get paid up until I leave, I get paid. I don't want anything. I want him, because after I serve 2 to 3 terms, he's going to build it up, and my team will build it up. The lawyers that we have will build that up. I'll come back and work for them, because I'll bring some additional skills after, I'll be 67 when I go back. And I'll go back a more well-rounded individual, having had a successful tenure in the city of Detroit, leading the city of Detroit into the next wave and carrying it. And I'll tell you, here's one thing that what we don't do in Black culture, in Black world, right? Just like I have people so this law firm, right? It's bigger than just a law firm. It's a way of life. It's a means to raise people's families and people who work there. And when you see it that way, that it is living and breathing, and this is beyond what it does as far as what we intend to do and what we intend to serve for other people who come and hire us for our services, or for people we do pro bono services for, or for the community outreach we do. Beyond that, it's internally. Those people, I'm so proud of the people that have been there. I've had lawyers who've left, who are now the general counsel for the Wayne County Sheriff, who are the deputy general counsel for Detroit Water and Sewage. My brother, who's now a judge, Judge Bowie out here in Pontiac. There have been people who've gone on and so, when they talk about youth employment and what they would do as mayor, I've been doing it at this firm almost every summer. COVID kind of sort of derailed us a little bit, because it was harder to work in that particular environment. And but every year, last night we had the forum with the young people. I had interns that are now managers and doing other professional work, not necessarily lawyers, but they had an opportunity to see how business was done and how business was run, because they see our business clients. They've gone to drop documents off at court, drop documents off at the office, but it gives them exposure that they wouldn't otherwise have. So, I am what they call, going to U of D is a Jesuit tradition called men for others. You might also say men or women for others, but I am a man for others, meaning that, I know what it means to give something for nothing in return, just giving it, because that blessing is like you're paying it forward. And I'm circling back. The problem that we have in our world in the Black power structure is when we get power and we're put in a position of power, we never nurture and develop someone to come after us. So I would not be, my model to live my life is as a leader. The last leader that we've known in the city of Detroit was Coleman Young. That's who I experienced. Leadership is something different than being in that seat. I'm not running for a position. I'm running for purpose. I'm not running a campaign. I'm running a movement. And my goal is day one to start searching for that next person who's going to come after me, because Detroiters deserve to have continuity in greatness, continuity in leadership, continuity in thought, continuity in growth, and all of those things. So, you got to set your ego aside and humble yourself. You have to lead with humility. And when you do that, it becomes not about you.
I love what you said, and I know that this was one of those interviews that I knew coming up. Just knowing you, I was like, okay, this is going to be a great discussion where we touched on many different things.
It's so much more we could,
And yeah. I mean, you got to come back. You should have been back anyway, but that will stay fluid because I'm hoping that people can walk away with some understandings.
Right.
But I got to ask this before I get to the classic Detroit is different questions because you've been seeing corporate counsel. Legal standings between the city of Detroit and so many of the other relationships. But let's just go with Lansing itself because Detroit is chartered through Lansing. Where do you see that relationship and what advantage from seeing that lens as an attorney do you have? And being that you've seen some of these contracts and that relationship between Lansing or between the Michigan government and the city of Detroit government?
Well, it also changes with the environment and who's running in Lansing, But I truly believe that as a lawyer, I understand how it works. I understand how the law can be imposed. And see, one of the things that I know when I see something that's wrong and I see something that's not working, I know how to take and push it from a legal perspective, whether we're going to go to court, threaten to go to court, or just tell them where they're wrong in a legal way. Also, you have a mechanism in what you call lobbying and creating those relationships. And a lot of people are talking about, like Mr. Durhall, he talks about the relationships he had in Lansing, and those relationships ain't even there anymore with term limits. But at the same time, he's saying how he understands this, but he doesn't understand it in the same intricate way that I do, and the way that in which you have to in order to be effective. And I guarantee you that much. I will be effective. Well, and again, I'm not guaranteeing you what particular outcome, but they're going to know where we stand as a city. And aligning ourselves and bringing ourselves, because, also you have to understand, if you stand on the premise, you know how we say in the streets, standing on business. If you stand on business that so goes Detroit, so goes Michigan, once they get a chance to understand that, and once you get rid of this apathy, and once you mobilize the people in one particular direction, we cannot be stopped. That's what they have to understand. And that goes from the corporate structure, that goes from the streets, that goes from everybody. And I want us all to work together. I'm not disaligned with anybody, but I am for the people, though.
And that's one of the things that I always have said when you read, I was like, okay, because you do have such relationships in social capital, especially in community. And clearly, I mean, in representing it, I don't necessarily, crime is always spoke about in public safety. And I see it different, as I definitely think that a lot of the public safety issues are the conditions of the poverty that's so pervasive throughout the community.
Right.
Even though there are definitely people that have used the street economy to, in certain ways, what we would consider uplift past it. But you definitely have relationships with
I represent a lot of Republicans. Well, I represent a lot of Republicans that are very public cases. In Macomb County, I represent Pete Lucido, who's the Macomb County prosecutor. I have other clients who are Republicans. So as a lawyer, that spans the parameters, or that spans the Democrat-Republican thing, because I could be green and purple, but if I can help someone, they don't care where I come from. And as long as their issues are not something that, I'm not going to represent the KKK. I understand that the Constitution says that everybody's entitled to representation, but there's just some limitations that you have to have from a moral perspective, and what the fabric and where I come from just are completely disaligned. And the reality is, I'm doing them a favor. Somebody like that, or somebody who I totally could, disagree with or even be repulsed by, because I'm not going to be effective representing them. And I'm doing them a favor by sending them somewhere else. But again, Republicans, Democrats, they're human beings. And once you get down to talking to them, do you know, it's almost like DNA. And I'm sure you know that, but I don't know if your audience knows, 99.999% of our DNA is all the same. it's that 0.001 or such a small, minuscule amount of our DNA that makes us different, and that's what makes everyone different. So I say that from perspective of Republicans and Democrats. Everybody really wants to be able to get an education, raise their kids, be safe in their homes, have a retirement, live a decent life, and be able to take a vacation on a general perspective, right? There's some who want a lot more and some may want nothing. But for the most part, that's where everybody is. But how they see us in getting there and who should be there, therein lies the differences.
Yeah, it's warfare or football, because football can be like
I
warfare.
said it was war, didn't I?
Yeah,
I did.
it's like, let's just say it's football. We all want to win a game. You know, you got to score touchdowns. It's just what plays are we running versus what plays are you running in strengths and weaknesses. So classic Detroit is different questions. Now,
yes.
very first one. Your very first car, year, make, and model, year you got it.
My year, make, and model, it was a Mercury Scorpio. It was an 89. I bought it off of Royal Oak Ford, and I bought it in either 92 or 93.
I don't even know what a Mercury Scorpio is.
Yeah. It was a Ford product.
Okay.
Made in Germany.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
My brother, we still have some of them today in our car collection.
Okay. Where's the first place you went when you got it?
You know where the first place I went, man. And it's somewhere that young people what breaks my heart is where they don't go now. Come on. I went to Belle Isle.
Wow.
I went to Belle Isle, bro. I went to Belle Isle. That's where I went. I got the car, I think I think it was a Thursday night. My dad took me out there to get the car, and, and I paid for the car. I paid the note. But, he signed with me and everything like that. But the Friday night, I went to Belle Isle.
Wow.
For sure.
Wow. Now that's...
The whole North End was rolling with me. Belle Isle.
I'm with it. Now that is Detroit.
Yeah.
That is Detroit.
Was Detroit.
Oh man.
Was Detroit. We don't run Belle Isle. We still own it.
Yeah.
We don't run it. It's a different place today.
Yep. Yeah. The culture is different, but we see it. We see it.
No, we see it, but something we're gonna get back to another day under the Perkins plan.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Next question. You're the DJ at the end of the fireworks. You get to play 2 songs. Woodward and Jefferson. What songs you playing?
One's gonna be off America's Most Wanted. Yeah. I'm just hearing those tracks in my head. I'll just tell you albums. It could be almost any one of those songs. And the next is Tupac's last album. That's it. I mean, I'm telling on my age, but that's where I'm at.
Okay.
The whole albums. You know what I'm saying? Those were 2 albums that I saw no deficiencies in any one song. I mean, and at the time, then you had, the Dog Pound and Death Row come through. Some of the entertainment that was on the albums. When they were dogging the West Coast rappers and they were dogging the East Coast rappers, it was entertaining before it became dangerous. You know what I'm saying? But yeah, I America's Most Wanted, and then
Machiavelli. So yeah. Ice Cube, you definitely don't get any pushback, and it's so interesting, like politically and just the growth.
Now I'm upset with him a little bit politically.
Yeah,
I was just going art.
Yeah, we talking album.
Art.
We talking album.
We're talking about Ice Cube in 1992. You know what I'm saying?
We talking really. That's 92 Ice Cube.
No,
yeah.
90. I think it was 90, when he left.
Yeah. So the first album,
college,
the first album,
when he came out on his own, when he left
NWA.
Yeah. But and we didn't get a chance to see Senator Tupac. I always believed he was that was his call, and that was where he was going to be.
Yeah, that and Machiavelli, two pivotal pieces in hip hop history. Two albums, and it's a lot of songs off of both. You know what I'm saying? I mean, from this, you could definitely say "Who's the Mac" could matter on many levels to a lot of stuff happening in America right now. You talk about federally. So, and then last question: you could rename Woodward after one Detroiter. Who would it be and why?
Coleman Young.
Most named one. Why for you?
Why not? He defines what Detroit should be. He is a man that was put under attack and called a communist, almost put in jail, in prison, to ascend to a city. The next mayor shortly after the riots, I think Roman Gribbs came after Judge Gribbs came after the riots, but obviously the first black mayor. But, what he espoused is leadership. And what I mean by that is some people just think because you're elected, that makes you a leader. No, that means people voted for you and you won an election. But leadership means that people will follow you. It's almost like faith. You don't have to see what people are saying, but you trust what they're saying enough that you'll follow. And he is an individual. And another reason why?
What?
There's not a goddamn statue of him throughout the city. We have a building named after him. But, we have, and another, another person, not a black person, white friend of mine was saying this. And I make a point of saying that because I felt bad that I didn't think about it. And, I'm Mr. Black, look at my shirt, but he said, something, we have all these monuments and it really doesn't have any, you don't see enough black people in memorialized and made immortal in these fixtures. And, that's not the only reason why I would name it after him, but he stands for what Detroit should be and what Detroit, how we should be and how should we be reforming ourselves and growing ourselves. But, resilience, integrity. He spent most of his career under a wiretap.
I mean, I remember when Charlie Beckham was in here, and it was something I uplifted during my Fred Durrell interview. That's
a bad bro.
Charlie Beckham was in here for his interview, leading into like when he was when he got his papers for indictment. At that time, it was an 800,000 page document on the Coleman Young administration at that time. So meaning that the FBI office was
just watching
it to the point where he even brought this up. Shout out Charlie, love Charlie. Charlie was
look at this guy. He's worked for Charlie Beckham.
Yeah,
worked for 5 or 6 mayors. You know what I'm saying? I mean, I would. I've never had a conversation with him, but I would love to talk. He's brilliant.
He would love. I would love to witness the exchange. But he said during the investigation, they go to a diner, and in that diner, the FBI witnessed that they talked at that diner. So then they said for over a month, they just bugged every booth in that diner again under the thought process they'd come back, and they finally came back in a month. But just think about the exhaustive resources from our federal government that went into that just under the guise of what Coleman Young represented. And I mean, you can also check, this is another Khary Frazier process.
What did they find?
But the same thing with the FBI files. If anybody watches the IFC documentary about Martin Luther King and the FBI files of him, and just like, they said like in his office in Atlanta, it was like 60 employees. Of those 60, like 43 of them had connections to were tied, and they said all informants, but that means they all had some ties. I mean, we think of the roots of the FBI connecting to Marcus Garvey. COINTELPRO.
The fact that we have a president that wants to dismantle DEI and unname things after Black people, and we haven't taken Edgar Hoover's name off of that building is a sacrilege. Is an absolute travesty. But it's what we have. We got this race baiting and all these other things that are unfortunate, and it's only going to be when we stand up for ourselves and demonstrate that we're going to not, we're going to be, people are going to take account of us, then they'll respect us.
I feel it. With that being said, thank you so much, Attorney Perkins. Thank you so much, and best of luck to the run for mayor and everything.
It's already happening. It's already happening. It's just, I'm going out to see my people and see them in the streets. I'm going to be running in the streets. I got my running team together.
Yeah.
And if you ever look at the campaigns, right? Look at, and you have access to video because you are watching a lot of this, because you're, as much as you are in the entertainment world, you're watching the political landscape right now. Look at the things that I've said, and everybody duplicates what I do.
Hilarious.
I've been running, right? And I run with my kids, nothing, made up. But then, I looked it up the other day. I saw Mary. She's got a whole commercial of her running, with the drone of her running and stuff like that. I mean, it's hilarious, just even on a small level, how people want to copycat, but as Warren Buffett said, copycatting is the best form of flattery.
There we go. With that being said, Detroit is different.
Peace.
Peace.
Detroit is different. Detroit is